Senator McCain. Senator McCain, thank you again for being with us. You were at Ground Zero today with Senator Obama. That day, 9/11, is still very fresh in the minds of people here in New York City and Washington and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, but there's evidence that it's receding in the memory of many, many Americans. What are one or two of the most important things that you think should be done to keep this an enduring memory for America?
Well, I think commemoration on days like today are very important. And I must say that both in Pennsylvania, and I understand in Washington, D.C., but I was in Pennsylvania earlier today, and the ceremonies that went on today, I think, served to remind all Americans. But I think the best way to commemorate and the best way to show our appreciation for and love and sympathy for their families, for those who have sacrificed, is to serve our country. That's what this forum is all about, serving our country. And that way we can assure their families it'll never happen again. That way I think we can honor their service and their sacrifice to our nation in remarkable acts of courage and compassion and love. And it's probably the best way to not only prevent a reoccurrence, but keep their memory alive by protecting the lives of those fellow citizens who were unable to experience this firsthand, but are in danger.
Senator, as recently as this past Sunday, you talked very openly about the fact that Americans should have been asked to do more than go shopping or traveling. What would you have done as president in those circumstances to make people aware of what they should do as Americans after 9/11?
Well, first of all, I would have called them to serve. I would have created organizations ranging from neighborhood block watch to making sure that our nuclear power plants are secure, to immediately proposing to Congress legislation such as Senator Evan Bayh and I proposed of service to country, to create additional organizations, to expand AmeriCorps, expand Peace Corps, expand the military. Obviously, we were facing a new threat. Obviously, we needed to, at that time, take advantage of the unity in the United States of America. We weren't Republicans on September 11th. We weren't Democrats. We were Americans. And I think that if we had asked for a concrete plan of action, both on the part of federal, state, and local governments, as well as by the Congress of the United States, as well as, frankly, talking directly to the American people, on the need for us all to serve this nation, I think perhaps but you know, I got to tell you something, Rick. When I travel around this country, that spirit is still there in America. Mm-hmm. Today, we've seen Americans respond in a way that only Americans do, and I don't say that with any sense of superiority over any other group of people, but I do believe we're a unique nation and blessed with certain inalienable rights that we want to extend to the rest of the world. But I think that we probably still have that opportunity. And when I say this, I don't want you to take it the wrong way, but Americans are so frustrated now with our government. 84% of the American people think the country's headed in the wrong direction. The approval rating of Congress is down to 9%, I believe. You're down to blood relatives and paid staffers. And this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to lead the nation and talk to the American people and reform our government and ask for more service.
Well, Senator, what are the obligations of citizenship other than paying taxes? And should there be, do you see service connected to what you're talking about in Washington? And should there be something compulsory?
No, I don't think so, Judy. I don't think, because I think when you compel someone to do something, then you basically are in contradiction to the fundamental principle of having people wanting to serve and willing and eager to serve. Americans are still eager to serve. Americans, when we look at all of the programs that we've made available, almost all of them, in fact, all of them are oversubscribed by people who are volunteering. What's the most, probably one of the lead organizations in America today is Teach for America. We're vastly, thousands more are seeking to be part of that program, to go in the inner cities of America and teach children. We're doing well in our military recruitment. Could do better. We've got to do better on retention, but we have to expand the military. So I believe Americans at this point, if you're digging for the pony as I clearly am, are ready now to be inspired. They're ready to go. They understand the challenges that we have in this world. They see the Russian invasion of a little country called Georgia. They see the problems in Afghanistan growing larger. They see a whole lot of things happening in the world that's going to require us to serve it, and that opportunity has to be provided to them.
I want to touch on something you said in an earlier answer, that Americans have a very low self-regard for Washington right now. How is it, though, that we can try to inspire people in public service and even go to Washington at the same time candidates are running against Washington and dissing Washington at every opportunity?
Because we have to reform government. We have to reform the way we're doing business. Look at Congress's activities since they came off their 5-week vacation. They never change. We presided over the biggest reorganization of government since the creation of the Defense Department and the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. We did do a lot of things right after 9/11, but it gradually eroded, and now I think the American people are ready. They're ready to rally behind, frankly, a new page to be turned in America's history.
Senator, we have less than a minute in this block, but do you think the length of your service in Washington gives you a unique understanding of the changes that need to be made? Help us understand how that is.
Well, first of all, you know, I wasn't elected Miss Congeniality again this year. And the fact is, I fought him and fought him and fought him. And we have achieved some reforms. With Russ Feingold, we achieved a landmark campaign finance reform bill. We did a number of other things. We enacted ethics and lobbying reform that wasn't nearly enough. I've fought against them, and there are allies there. We're not all the go-along to get along crowd. And I know how it works, and I know how to fix it, and I know where the problems are. And so I'm confident we can fix them.
Thank you, Senator. We'll be right back after this short break.
This Canada's Forum is being hosted by the group Service Nation, an organization pushing to increase the number of Americans who volunteer from 61 million to 100 million by 2020. Here's a little more about the group.
Michelle Nunn, CEO of the Points of Light Institute. What is the Service Nation?
Well, Service Nation is a coalition of organizations that's led with Be the Change, City Year, and Civic Enterprises, and Points of Light Institute, and really over 100 other organizations and lead partners and supporters. And we are looking to raise the issue of service and civic engagement for the country and to create a new threshold of possibility for how people are involved in their communities, and specifically to create a nation in which over 100 million volunteers are participating annually, and over 1 million volunteers have the opportunity to participate in full-time service, like AmeriCorps and Peace Corps.
And then you're holding this candidate forum. What's the idea behind it?
Yeah. Well, we think what's really exciting and important, especially on this day of September 11th, is to call attention to the fact that at least one thing that both candidates agree upon is the idea of really calling our nation to action and calling people to serve and to make a difference in their communities and to their country and in the world. And we think it's really notable, and we think we really want to call out and ask these candidates how they are going to take that principled commitment and turn it into real legislative policy and change, and how their vision will translate into the ability for Americans to really participate in changing their democracy and changing their country.
Talk about how you were able to set this up.
Well, as you can imagine, it is not an easy task to pull together both presidential candidates, and so after a lot of inquiries and entreaties from a variety of leaders, volunteers, and grassroots folks across the country, both candidates did agree, and I think that it poised here in New York on September 11th couldn't be a more fitting setting.
There are two 45-minute back-to-back interviews. How did you decide the format?
Yeah, the campaigns came together and negotiated that, and it seemed we did not want it to be a political debate, but really an affirmation of commonality. So they'll have the chance to point out their particular ways of delivering on their vision for service, but also really wanted to, I think, demonstrate that this is an opportunity for unity and for shared vision.
John McCain is up first. Did you decide who goes first based on a coin toss, or how did it work?
I believe that's correct.
Michelle Nunn, CEO of the Points of Light Institute. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Now the Presidential Candidates Forum continues from the campus of Columbia University in New York City.
Senator, even as we sit here tonight, Hurricane Ike is bearing down on the Texas coast. What are the lessons that we learned from Hurricane Katrina, where we had the largest voluntary outpouring in American history? And aren't emergencies and disasters like this exactly why government needs to exist? What is the role of the private sector, and what is the role of government?
The role of government, obviously, is a primary role. To protect our citizens and help them in times of emergency and distress. But also, I think there's a great role for faith-based organizations, volunteer organizations, and the private sector. I think we've got to involve more businesses and industries that routinely provide goods and services rather than rely on the federal government to do it. I don't think, frankly, if FedEx or Target or one of these organizations had been in charge, we wouldn't have had a truck full of ice ending up in Maine. They know where everything is. So we need to have that partnership. But I also want to point out that faith-based organizations, as well as other volunteer organizations, did a magnificent job. There's a place called the Resurrection Baptist Church down in New Orleans. Thousands of volunteers from churches all over the country came and are still working in New Orleans as we speak. So the primary role is government, but we also need to have citizen involvement in a way which, to say the least, we all know you need a better level of cooperation between federal, state, and local government. We saw that. We saw a dramatic improvement in this last threat we had. And our thoughts and prayers go out to the people of Texas and the area that's threatened now. And we pray, God, that it's minimal and we're ready to help. That's the primary responsibility of government.
Senator, it's been pointed out that for many people to be able to do volunteer work, they are often people of some means. They can take a leave from their job, or they may not need to work. Often volunteer work, service, is left to those who are more comfortable, whereas other people, especially young people who want to do service, may graduate from college with a huge education debt. How do you balance that?
Well, first of all, my experience has not been that the wealthiest people do the most volunteering. In fact, I think it is average citizens that do the most. In all due respect to rich people, but the point, it seems to me it's the average citizen that's the first to respond. But I agree with you. We should provide, especially from a business standpoint, if someone graduates from a fine institution or university, then we hope that the people that hire them would give them additional time to maybe go down and volunteer in a Habitat for Humanity or some other worthwhile cause. But honestly, you know what I've found? The busiest people are the busiest. And the busier they get, the busier they get. And the more time they find to help their neighborhood, their community, and their fellow citizens.
So there's no need.
I'm very pleased at the volunteer effort in America. I'm very pleased at what we've seen around this country, particularly as we're in difficult times. I think we can be proud of Americans. And obviously, if we need to take some steps to encourage that or make it easier for them, I'm all for it.
Would you encourage corporations to give paid leave for service, which some companies are doing, like Timberland?
If they want to, but I wouldn't force them to. If they want to do that, I would praise them, I would cite them as an example, but I don't think we can force that kind of thing.
Let's go to a different subject, a subject that's close to your heart. In Faith of My Fathers, you write about how there's been a McCain who's fought in pretty much every American conflict going back 200 years. That's a huge legacy that was thrust on you. You talk about it being a little bit intimidating. What I wonder is if you talk personally about how that was conveyed to you as a boy, and then how you conveyed that to your own children.
Well, you know, a lot of times I don't talk too much publicly because I'm not a hero. I had the great honor of serving in the company of heroes, and in Hanoi I observed 1,000 acts of courage and compassion and love. But I'd like to tell you that one day as a child I said, gee, I'm going to, you know, be in military service. But it was just sort of something that was part of our tradition, and I rebelled against it. I chronicled that perhaps in too much detail. But it sort of was something that evolved. But then it was like a lot of young Americans. A lot of that glory was all about me. And it wasn't until I had the experience that I had that I realized that I belonged to my country and that my country saved me, and I owed my country a great deal. And that change made me appreciate the fact that it's not about the individual, it's about the cause we serve.
Senator, still on the subject of military, in the wake of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we know that recruiting has gotten harder. The qualifications for joining the Army have been lowered today. 30% of new enlistees don't have high school diplomas. That's the highest percentage ever. The percentage of young people who are either black, Hispanic, or who come from a lower income household is disproportionately high in the military. All this while the sons and daughters of privilege, for the most part, your sons excluded, don't have to consider military service. We have the greatest fighting army in the world. I think everyone would agree. But is there something about this picture that you think needs to change, this social imbalance?
Well, I would remind you in the days of the draft that it was then most unfair because the lowest income Americans served and the wealthiest found ways of avoiding a draft. I think the all-volunteer force is having difficulties recruiting and retaining because we're too small, and we need to expand the size of our military, and we need to do it as rapidly as possible. And we've got to perhaps offer additional incentives. For a long time, years ago, the Navy and the Air Force were losing pilots, so we paid them more, and we had more of them stay in. Their first reason for serving is patriotism, but also you've got to offer them incentives in order to do so. And frankly, we're here in a wonderful institution. I'm proud that my daughter graduated from this school. But do you know that this school will not allow our OTC on this campus? I don't think that's right. Shouldn't the students here be exposed to the attractiveness of serving in the military, particularly as an officer? So maybe I would hope that these universities would re-examine. I would hope that these universities would re-examine that policy of not even allowing people to come here who represent the military and other Ivy League schools, and then maybe they will be able to attract some more. Now, that's not the heart of the problem. But I believe that we have the best trained, most professional, best equipped, bravest military we've ever had in our history today.
And we'll come back to this. We'll be right back after this break.
Events were held in New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington today, marking the 7th anniversary of the terrorist attacks. President Bush was at the Pentagon for a dedication.
The Pentagon Memorial will stand as an everlasting tribute to 184 innocent souls who perished on these grounds. The benches here bear each of their names, and beneath each bench is a shimmering pool filled with the water of life, a testament to those who were taken from us and to their memories that will live on in our hearts. For the families and friends of the fallen, this memorial will be a place of remembrance. Parents will come here to remember children who boarded Flight 77 for a field trip and never emerged from the wreckage. Husbands and wives will come here to remember spouses who left for work one morning and never returned home. People from across our nation will come here to remember friends and loved ones who never had the chance to say goodbye. A memorial can never replace what those of you mourning a loved one have lost. We pray that you will find some comfort amid the peace of these grounds. We pray that you'll find strength in knowing that our nation will always grieve with you. For all our citizens, this memorial will be a reminder of the resilience of the American spirit. As we walk among the benches, we will remember there could have been many more lives lost. On a day when buildings fell, heroes rose. Pentagon employees ran into smoke-filled corridors to guide their friends to safety. Firefighters rushed up the stairs of the World Trade Center as the towers neared collapse. Passengers aboard Flight 93 charged the cockpit and laid down their lives to spare countless others. One of the worst days in America's history saw some of the bravest acts in Americans' history. We'll always honor the heroes of 9/11, and here at this hallowed place we pledge that we will never forget their sacrifice. We also honor those who raised their hands and made the noble decision to defend our nation in a time of war. When our enemies attacked the Pentagon, they pierced the rings of this building, but they could not break the resolve of the United States Armed Forces. Since 9/11, our troops have taken the fight to the terrorists abroad so we do not have to face them here at home. Thanks to the brave men and women and all those who work to keep us safe, there has not been another attack on our soil in 2,557 days.
That entire Pentagon ceremony will air immediately after this forum with the presidential candidates. Now more about service from Republican presidential nominee John McCain.
Let's stay on the subject of the military. You authorized a really interesting military policy, and it was started out as a bill that you mentioned that you and Evan Bayh co-sponsored, and then you inserted it in the Defense Appropriations Act that blends military and civilian service, the 18-24-18 policy, which I won't explain. But it's leading me to a larger question. Why wouldn't we have compulsory military service in America that has a civilian component, that if someone wants to opt out of military service, they can do their civilian service like in your bill, and that it would become a unifying thing for America?
Well, Rick, first of all, I think that as much as I treasure our military service, there's lots of ways to serve our country too, and I want to emphasize that. I know we're talking a lot about the military, but there's so many ways to serve this country, and there's so many ways that are noble and wonderful, both at home and abroad. So I want to make that perfectly clear. I think that it's very clear that AmeriCorps has been one of the astonishing successes. Peace Corps, we've seen the success for a long time because Jack Kennedy obviously originated it. But we have seen these volunteer organizations succeed. And if we need to, whether it's connected to the military or not, provide them with sufficient reward and sufficient recognition. You know, a lot of these young people are more proud of the fact that we recognize the ones walking around with a red jacket that say City Year than they are about the money. You know, I mean, that's what they're all about. So I'd be glad to reward them as much as possible. But you want to be careful that the reason is not the reward of financial or other reasons, but the reward is the satisfaction of serving a cause greater than yourself. But that'd be fine with me. Finding new ways to serve. That's what this next few years should be all about.
Senator McCain, Senator Obama has put forward a national service plan to do some of the things you've talked about. The two of you agree, but his has a price tag of around $3.5 billion. Is that an amount of money you'd be willing to spend, more, less? I mean, is that in the ballpark?
I'd be glad to spend money. I don't think that should be the first priority in the kinds of benefits that are reaped from the kind of thing we're trying to seek. I haven't agreed with all of what Senator Obama has proposed, but I think they're very good proposals there. Some of them are new, some of them are obviously not. But I also want to emphasize it doesn't always have to be run by the government. That's why we also ought to understand that faith-based organizations, other volunteer organizations that are completely separate from the government, that have nothing to do with the government, are amongst the most successful. So let's not get entrapped by the idea that the government has to run these voluntary organizations and volunteer kinds of programs, because a lot of times the job can be done better with our encouragement.
So you're not in favor necessarily of a distinct government role?
Oh, we have a distinct government role, the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, all of these other organizations, but I want to be careful about expanding it when my philosophy is let's not have government do things that the private sector can do or other organizations can do. That's just my theory of government. So, look, I applaud Senator Obama's commitment to national service. He makes a very strong case, and I look forward to joining him no matter what happens in November. This is a cause a lot bigger than anything to do with partisanship.
Actually, speaking of that, I was going to ask an internet question. We'll get back to that. Governor Schwarzenegger in California has made the service czar in California a cabinet-level appointment. If you were president, would you do the same and make service a cabinet-level appointment? And would you perhaps ask Senator Obama to be the member of your cabinet for national service?
Yes. Right now, as you know, there's an office in the White House, Freedom Corps office. That office coordinates all these different organizations, which, rightly or wrongly, fall many times under different departments. I think if you have that person right down the hall from the Oval Office and you're working with that person on a daily basis, that's probably the most effective way to do it. You know, every time we see a problem, we sort of, let's create another cabinet post. Now we've got so many members of the cabinet that the cabinet never meets, as you well know. So I'd rather see a powerful, influential, outstanding person sitting in that office who I could literally deal with every day.
Senator, at the Republican convention, a couple of speakers, most notably your running mate, vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin, made somewhat derisive comments about Senator Obama's experience as a community organizer. I've heard you say you haven't taken that tone. So I guess my question is, are you saying to others in your campaign and your supporters that that's not the kind of language you want to hear? Well, how are you approaching that?
First of all, this is a tough business. Second of all, I think the tone of this of this whole campaign would have been very different if Senator Obama had accepted my request for us to appear in town hall meetings all over America, the same way Jack Kennedy and Barry Goldwater had agreed to do so. I know that because I've been in enough campaigns. Look, Governor Palin was responding to the criticism of her inexperience and her job as a mayor in a small town. That's what she was responding to. Of course I respect community organizers. Of course I respect people who serve their community. And Senator Obama's record there is outstanding. And so I praise anyone who serves this nation in capacities that, frankly, we all know that could have been far more financially rewarding to individuals rather than doing what they did.
Less significant than the work of a small-town mayor?
I think a small-town mayor has very great responsibilities. They have responsibility for the budget. They have hiring and firing of people. They have great responsibilities. They have to stand for election. I admire mayors. Listen, mayors have the toughest job, I think, in America. It's easy for me to go to Washington and frankly, be somewhat divorced from the day-to-day challenges people have. So I admire mayors. I admire anyone who is willing to serve their community and their country. And that's what this is all about. And this is what today's all about. And we should set aside this partisanship, at least for this day, praise one another for our dedication to this country. That's what I do. That's what I do.
We have less than a minute left in this segment, and here's a specific question about setting aside partisanship. Senator Kennedy and Senator Hatch, two old friends in the Senate, have sponsored a bipartisan bill on national service that I think, among other things, would triple the size of AmeriCorps and really put a lot of the strength of the federal government behind national service. As president, would you sign that bill?
Yes, but I want it, of course. Our prayers are always with Ted Kennedy. I understand he's coming back in January. I greet that with mixed emotions. I love him. I'm so happy, seriously, that Senator Kennedy is on the road to recovery. He's a lion of the Senate. Look, I would sign that legislation, but I also want to caution again. Government can't do it all. The essence of volunteerism starts at the grassroots level, does not start necessarily at the federal government level. So let's make sure we maintain the balance between federal involvement and encouragement of volunteerism and service to the nation, but also let's not in any way stifle what already is going on and is very, very successful in America, and that's organizations that have no dependence whatsoever on our federal government and do such a great job for all of our citizens.
All right, Senator, we're going to take another break. We'll be right back.
We'll return to the Candidates Forum after a short break. Members of Congress remembered 9/11 on the West Front steps of the U.S. Capitol today. Here's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
President Lincoln once referred to the harsh artillery of time, referencing it as something that could dull the memory. Hopefully, the harsh artillery of time will dull the pain for those who suffered so much on 9/11. But there is no harsh artillery of time that will dull our memory of the events that happened that day.
No.
Once again, we gather to observe the unforgettable horror of 9/11. We gather to convey our deepest sympathy to the families of 9/11, many of whom turned their grief into strength to make America safer. They deserve our deepest gratitude and will always be in our thoughts and prayers.
Yes.
And no harsh artillery of time will dull the memory of the courageous first responders, the police, firefighters, the emergency service people, the construction workers who came to the rescue, in many cases losing their lives in order to save others. We must honor them not only with our words, but by meeting the health needs of those who linger, whose problems linger to this day. Across the globe, Americans in our military and our intelligence service and our diplomatic services are battling terrorism to better protect our nation. And across our country, our first responders are protecting the American people, keeping them safe at home. Yes. We salute all of them for their patriotism, for their courage, and for the sacrifices they and their families are making for our country. Earlier this morning, thousands of people gathered at the Pentagon for the dedication by President Bush of the Pentagon Memorial. It is truly an inspirational tribute to those who lost their lives on 9/11 in Virginia. For them and for all in Pennsylvania and New York who suffered and died on that day, we now observe a moment of silence.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi at the Capitol in Washington today. There were also 9/11 events held in New York and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. You can hear all of the congressional ceremony in our overnight programming here on C-SPAN. Now back to Columbia University for more about service and civic engagement. Back-to-back interviews with Senators John McCain and Barack Obama. This event hosted by the group Service Nation.
Senator McCain, there's so much emphasis, of course, today on the younger generation giving. What about baby boomers and older folks? What should we be doing for this country?
I think there are obviously organizations that we have in place for ability to serve, but we ought to really probably do a more and more effective job of utilizing the talents and experience of people who have had very successful lives and careers and continue to motivate them to serve. I think that's part of the proposals that have been made, and we do have the Senior Corps and other organizations, but the fact is that people are living longer and they're more active and vigorous, and I'm here to tell you that's a fact. And so, Judy, I really believe that is one of the underutilized aspects of community service in America, and I think that would be one of the areas of emphasis, really.
If I could just quickly follow up, I asked partly because we got a number of online questions, sure. And a woman named Giselle from Brooklyn, New York, she says, with the staggering economy, how can people commit time to community service and still make ends meet? I know you said earlier, people of all income brackets, but what about those people who really do have to work to make
our economy is broken. People are sitting around not worrying about volunteering, but staying in their homes, keeping their job, affording fill up their gas tank. We know that. Americans are hurting very badly. We got to reform government. We got to fix the economy. We got to create jobs. But right now, we have to restore trust and confidence in government. If people don't trust the government, then they're not going to be as eager and willing to, frankly, be part of these programs that we are proposing and that we are hoping that people will volunteer and serve in. So obviously, we have to fix our economy and get it going again and create jobs for Americans. But I think honestly, that there are also Americans who are willing to volunteer their services no matter what. But when people have a reasonable income and reasonable future, obviously they're going to volunteer more.
Let's talk about some folks who don't trust us, and that's a lot of countries overseas. You've talked about expanding the Peace Corps. You've also said we shouldn't be sending money to countries that don't like us. But should we be sending people, sending members of the Peace Corps to countries that don't like us to help our esteem in the world, which, of course, has suffered since 9/11?
Yes, and that's the best thing we can do is expose the people in these countries to the things we value, the things we stand for, the things we believe in, and there's no better representative of all that than Americans. But also I want to add, let's also have more people come here and be educated and trained and be exposed to the United States of America. We have found throughout the world people that come and get educated here and return to the countries they came from as leaders. It's amazing, and it establishes a base relationship that I think can also change the policies of a number of these countries that don't like us very much.
Would you give a green card to everybody, every foreign national who graduates with a PhD in the sciences to stay in America?
I certainly would do everything I can to keep those people in this country. I don't know if it would be an automatic green card, but I guarantee you that we'd love to have so many of these highly trained people stay in this country, and ask any corporate executive in America, particularly those in the information technology business.
Senator, I want to come back to something you said earlier. I think you used the word exceptional or unique about being an American. On this 9/11, this special day, help us understand what you think it means to be an American. And I don't mean that in the obvious way. I mean, people who live in Canada, who live in Mexico, and around the world feel special about their country. So what is it that's different about being an American? Are Americans better than people in some of these other countries? We hear the term exceptionalism about the United States.
I do believe in American exceptionalism, and I think it was best articulated by our founding fathers. But I also think that my hero, Teddy Roosevelt, expressed it very well, and other leaders throughout our history. We are the only nation I know in the world that really is deeply concerned about adhering to the principle that all of us are created equal and endowed by our creators with certain rights. And those we have tried to bring to the world, and we have not so much militarily, but through example, through leadership, through economic assistance. Look at what we did for Europe after World War II. Look at the continuous efforts we make throughout the world. Look at the efforts we're making to combat HIV/AIDS in Africa. There's a lot more America can do. And I love these other countries, and I'm not trying to denigrate them, but I know of no other country in the world with the generosity of spirit and the concern for fellow human beings than the United States of America, and I think that goes back to our very beginnings.
Does that make America better than these other
I think it makes us exceptional. I think it makes us exceptional in the kind of citizenry we have and the kind of service and sacrifice that we are capable of. And I mean that in no disrespect to any other nation, our close and unique relationship with the British. I'm not trying to in any way denigrate any other nation, but it doesn't in any way diminish my pride in the history of this nation, which has literally shed our blood in all four corners of the earth many times in defense of someone else's freedom, and have tried to further the principles of freedom and democracy everywhere in the world. I think we're dedicated to that proposition, and frankly, I think we've done a pretty good job.
Now let's talk about the framers for a second, because one of the things that they distrusted and disliked, they called it faction, which they meant political parties. The framers didn't want to have political parties. George Washington hated the idea of political parties. But now we're in the midst of a campaign between two parties, and the tone of the campaign has gotten pretty ugly. You've talked from the beginning about running a different kind of campaign, so has Senator Obama. You've both talked about a high-minded campaign. What does this do to people who are interested in public service? I mean, there are lots of people who think, man, I can't run for office when this kind of thing is happening. What does that do to we're here for service, and what does that campaign tell us about that?
First of all, I've said repeatedly, I think Senator Obama has inspired millions of Americans who otherwise wouldn't have been involved in the political process. That's just a fact. And I believe that my record of service and my vision for the future has attracted people. I think you're going to see the biggest voter turnout in history in this election. Has it been rough? Of course. And again, it isn't the final recipe or the only answer, but I think Americans would be helped enormously if we stood on the stage together tonight and talked about national service, all four of us, rather than three and one going on and then the other. And again, I hope that Senator Obama will accept my request. Let's go around America. Let's listen to hopes and dreams and aspirations of the American people and respond to them. I think that's the best and most effective way of getting everybody involved in this campaign.
Do you think it's naive of people to expect that politics could be a little less rough and tumble and even nasty.
Look, the people make the final judgment with their votes. They make the final judgment about campaigns and how we present ourselves to the American people, and I think that that will be the ultimate test of what kind of campaigns we run. I, again, think that it's very important that we focus on issues, we focus on challenges that America faces today, both domestically and national security-wise, and I intend to do that. And there's 54 more days left. Who's counting?
By 2042, the United States of America will no longer be a majority white nation. Robert Putnam, the sociologist, has written about how in communities that are diverse, there's actually less social capital, less trust. What can national service do to knit up America? And I'm sorry, we only have 1 minute left for such a complicated
National service
question.
can do a great deal. National service can unite us, just as the military unite us as we meet people from and interface with people from all over the world. But also let me say, look, the greatest thing that makes America exceptional is we have had wave after wave of people come to this country for the same reason. They wanted to build a better life. They wanted freedom, and they want to be part of America. So I don't accept that premise that somehow some of the most patriotic Americans I've ever seen and the hardest working and the most ready to serve this country and go in harm's way are those who just came here. I'll never forget being at a ceremony in Baghdad last 4th of July where 160-some people who are green card holders got their citizenship, and they had been willing to serve in the military for an accelerated path to citizenship. That's how much they wanted to be part of this country. That was an exhilarating experience.
Senator John McCain, thank you very, very much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Did we introduce Obama now? Is it Obama now or after the break? One minute. As we thank Senator McCain very much for his participation, we want to welcome now the Democratic nominee for President of the United States, Senator Barack Obama.